They have a guard shortage, like everybody else. They can't seem to hire people. People quit. I keep trying to figure out where people have all this independent wealth where they don't have to work. I must have missed that memo somehow. Ecclesiastes, verse 1, chapter 1. Yes. Did I not say that? Can't you read my mind? I do that to my wife all the time. Can't you read my mind? It's a good thing she can't. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem, vanities of vanities, saith the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit hath a man of all his labor which he taketh under the sun? Now, this book is so appropriate in the modern society that we live in. I call this the Bible book of philosophy. And this is the definitive book of philosophy. Nothing written since will ever outdo what Solomon did. There are many strains of philosophy, but Solomon here gives us probably the most honest one, which was popularized by Friedrich Nietzsche in the latter 19th century, called nihilism. I took Latin in high school, and nihil is a Latin word. It means nothing. And without God, we have absolutely nothing. And the problem today is that people don't really think through that. It's kind of like my wife and I recently watched that movie, which you can watch it. You're going to have to edit through some portions of it, but the movie on Oppenheimer. And the interesting thing about it was he was so adamant in creating the A-bomb, but once he did, he realized what a can of worms I opened. And he spent the rest of his life trying to lobby we need to control the usage of this thing. We need to be careful because we could destroy the human race. But that's the problem with human beings. We make choices, but we don't control consequences. And so many times we may create something, but we don't have the foresight to see all the ramifications of what we just created. And of course that could go with almost anything. I mean, the internet's a wonderful thing, but it's been used for great evil. And so many other great inventions that man has had. I mean, well, we better not. I could go real down a rabbit hole there. But Ecclesiastes means preacher. And it's interesting because nowadays, if you think that you're going to learn anything, you have to go and sit at the feet of the professor at your local university. And your average professor in a local university is a fool. And a fool in Scripture, according to Proverbs 1:7, is a rejecter of truth. And I remember going to college many years ago, and I thought it was bad then. What's it now? Fast forward 44 years later. When I went in there, they tried to make me doubt any absolute I came in with. Basically, their goal was to make me question. And that's kind of reminiscent of Matthew 4, if thou be the Son of God. If. The devil always is sowing doubt. Yea, hath God said? So he's a doubt sower, and that's all they did is try to sow doubt and make me not believe in any absolutes, but make me think everything's relative and anything goes. And that is a reasonable mindset if there's no God. Because if you stop and think about it, if there is no God, life is nothing more than a political power play. It's somebody trying to get in power and force their version of ethics and right and wrong upon you. And if you don't comply, in Russia's case, we send you to the gulags in Siberia, never to see you again. Or they just take you out back and shoot you, whatever's easier. And America's about to that place anymore. We're getting more brazen in our rejection. But the book of Ecclesiastes, you might say, is Solomon's memoirs. It's an inspired confession of failure and pessimism when God is excluded from life under the sun. You see, the word vanity in some form occurs 37 times, and the other prominent appearance is a phrase under the sun, which appears 28 times, because his approach to life in Ecclesiastes is life under the sun, so he's only going to take a horizontal viewpoint. Now, periodically he brings in God and takes that vertical view, but primarily he's taken a horizontal viewpoint. He's looking at life under the sun, and he's trying to find meaning and purpose in it. And his conclusion is, he starts out this way in the first chapter, and in chapter 12, verse 8, he repeats it, all is vanity. Without God, life has no meaning. Vanity meaning meaningless, worthlessness, insignificance. And that's what life boils down to. And Solomon here, in his old age, basically writes his memoirs and tells us, life is nothing more than vanity without God. And it records the experience of a man who tried everything under the sun to satisfy his heart and found that all was vanity and vexation of spirit. So this book is a divine commentary on Jesus' words in John 4:13, whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again. Everything in this life will make you thirst again. It's vanity, meaning it's empty, it's worthless, and it's vexation of spirit. It always leaves us wanting more. It vexes us and frustrates us and perplexes us, because everything in life always leaves me wanting more. If you could buy, the red Corvette, 2 weeks later, oh, I should have bought the blue one. Man, that looks so much better than mine. Or next year they come out with a new model, it's got more bells and whistles. Oh man, I should have got that one. It's just it's more. And Americans have had so much. We've got it all, that we're like the Athenians in Acts 17. We want to hear or tell some new thing. We always have to have something new. That new, every 5 seconds after that new thing on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, I got to have a new picture, They can't read anything or pay attention to a video longer than 3 or 4 minutes. I'm convinced that one of the major reasons we have such issues in life everywhere is the inability of Americans to concentrate anymore. They can't focus. Can you imagine having the average young person to sit down and you should give them a Bible and they say, oh, how am I ever going to get through that? And I think, should have read some of the engineering books I had in school, the math book I had, it was that thick. It was tough too. But we can't concentrate. We have to have some or tell some new thing. We're never happy. We're never satisfied. Look at 1 Kings chapter 11. First Kings chapter 11, verse 1, but King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughters of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites. Of the nations concerning which the Lord said unto the children of Israel, ye shall not go into them, neither shall they come in unto you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clave unto these in love. And he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. For it came to pass when Solomon was old that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. Now, it's amazing enough to think a man would want 1,000 wives. That becomes, I chuckle sometimes when I contemplate that. Because I always think of what my wife's old pastor used to say, dare there be a man with a soul so tough that would say one woman is not enough. And 1,000 anniversaries and 1,000 birthdays to remember. Obviously, folks, he probably couldn't remember one from the other, to be honest with you. But, let's be honest. Men, women, isn't one spouse enough? Isn't there enough problems there? without it being a rivalry, everybody's vying for first position. But anyway, we see here that Solomon, he ignored God's warning. As a king, in Deuteronomy 17, they were warned not to multiply silver or gold, which Solomon did. He multiplied horses, which he wasn't supposed to, but he did. And he multiplied wives. He violated all three. And of course, the other thing that he violated, obviously, was that he failed to, he was supposed to write a copy of the law and read it, so his heart wasn't lifted up. Well, obviously, he abandoned his Bible as well. So the result is he thought, it's like a lot of people think, well, you may not be able to do it, but I can do it. I'm the exception, I'm different. And the problem is the wisest man in the world became the biggest fool because he violated Scripture and he lived to fulfill it. Because, Solomon was looking for meaning and pleasure in life, but as he lived this lavish lifestyle, materialism slowly got a hold of him. And then you couple that with his wives, and then when he got old, he abandoned the Lord and started worshiping idols. Backsliding is a slow leak. It's not a blowout. It's a slow process. And he starts multiplying wives. He starts multiplying silver and gold. He starts multiplying horses. He's violating God's law. He's slipping from staying in the law, in the Scriptures. And pretty soon, the guy that's just kind of dabbling, trying to find meaning in life, all of a sudden, he's starting to worship idols. And his heart's turned away from God. And so he made the fatal mistake of thinking that he could get away from the Bible and violate the Bible and he'd be okay. So that's how he got into the place he was in. He slowly starts sliding from God, and it's a slow process to the place where it ends up him worshiping idols, false gods. And his Ecclesiastes is his memoirs. It's an old man looking back over his life and basically recording his mistakes. And boy, what a way to live. But go back to Ecclesiastes, and we'll look at some of the things that he sought for meaning and purpose in. First of all, in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, he sought purpose and meaning and wisdom. Verse 13, and I gave my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. Excuse me. And I gave my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. This sore travail hath God given to the sons of men to be exercised therewith. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. That which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. I commune with my own heart, saying, Lo, I am come to a great estate, and have got more wisdom than all they that have been before me in Jerusalem. Yea, my heart had great experience of wisdom and knowledge, and I gave my heart to know wisdom, and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is vexation of spirit. For in much wisdom is much grief. He that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. And you know this to be true. The more you study and understand, for instance, current events, the more knowledge and wisdom you acquire, the more grief it is, because you realize how shot this country is. You realize how everything, all you have to do to understand anything in this country is follow the money trail. Whether it comes to Big Pharma, whether it comes to all the social media platforms, it's all money. All these, the NFL and all these companies going woke, it's all about, they're just trying to ride the wave because it's all about making money. You realize a lot of these companies don't necessarily buy into that. They just play the game because they want to keep the bottom line growing. And that's the problem, is that there's so many Americans don't buy into this stupidity, but they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to upset their income. They don't want to upset their career path. They don't want to upset anything. And the point is you're not going to have nothing to upset because your country's going to disintegrate while you worry about holding on to your little kingdom. And that's Americans. We're not banded together in any way, shape, or form anymore. It's all about my little kingdom. And you're not going to have your little kingdom when everything disintegrates. But nobody is willing to stand up and say, hey, you may think you're a furry, but don't make me buy into your delusion. Okay? I had an instance of that just Friday. I was working in one of my stores, and there's this one female clerk that identifies she's a man. And I referred to her as a her, and her boss said it's a him. And I just sidestepped it, which is a miracle for me. Because what I wanted to say was, don't make me buy into your delusion. We're having a professional conversation. That doesn't include you making me buy into your delusions. But I just sidestepped it and went on and didn't even address it. But that's where we're at today. Wisdom. You know, the more you understand and know, the more grief you've got. But isn't that what people look for to find meaning in life? Wisdom. We would probably more define it in terms of education, degrees, intelligence. So if you're smart, you're the elite, and you know more than everybody, and you're superior to everybody, and that gives you purpose and meaning in life, to walk around with a bloated head, a bobblehead. And there's so many people think that way. This country's full of people think they're elitists. Bill Gates thinks he's an elitist, that he can determine what I don't know how much, I know we're over 8 billion, but what everybody should do. He is for population control. Now, they downplay it and say that's not true. Some of the statements that he's attributed to him are not true, but what it is true, he is for population control, and many of his cronies are. Okay? Well, who are you to decide who lives and who doesn't? Because their concern is they say this planet can handle 9 billion. After that, they begin to lose their control. Who says they should have control? They do. They're elitists because they're educated, they're smart. Well, in many cases, you know, it's because something else we'll look at here shortly. But people seek meaning in wisdom. Look at chapter 2, verse 1. I said in mine heart, go to now, I will prove thee with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of mirth, what doeth it? I sought in my heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting my heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was that good for the sons of men, which they should do under the heaven all the days of their life. Here he sought pleasure in wine, which in a larger sense means pleasure. There's another big one in America, pleasure. Hedonism is very popular. The chief good in life is pleasure. And you know, when you're atheistic, like most people are, okay? Not, as I've told you before, there are two types of atheists. The philosophical atheists, like the four horsemen of the New Atheism, Dawkins, Hitchens, Dennett, and Harris. And then you have the bigger bucket, practical atheists, which are people that believe in God, but He affects their life in no practical way or shape or form. I mean, you know, there's a lot of theoretical things I learned in college that have no practical bearing on my life. And that's what most people, God just has no bearing on their life. And how often are you and I guilty of that? You know, our goal here is not just to come in church and put in our time, but our goal is that this Bible determines what we love and what we hate, who our friends are, who we marry, what our career is, how we spend our money, what our entertainment is, how we vote. Oh yes, there's nothing you get to rope off from God. Everything you do should be determined and dictated by Scripture. But there's a massive disconnect. So people look to pleasure, and boy, do we have the pleasures to pursue in America. That's the sad thing about the modern Christian movement. This contemporary Christian movement is hung up on herding people into a building by various tricks and techniques. And basically, a lot of it involves just entertainment. You've all heard about the Super Bowl Sunday where they were using the Bible like a football and kicking it around at crossroads. And you wonder why. You see how deceived lost people are. When you see Christians that are that deceived that can sit in that travesty and watch that and call that Christianity, you have to want to believe a lie to buy into that. But do you understand that this contemporary Christianity, all that is trying to make a Christianity that's one, palatable to the world, and two, palatable to the flesh. Because I never can seem to quote it verbatim, but C.S. Lewis, to paraphrase him, said, if you're looking for a comfortable religion, don't pick Christianity. Because Christianity is about God, you get all of God when you get saved, then the rest of the Christian life is God getting all of you. He wants all of you. All. And the picture is Saul and the Amalekites in 1 Samuel 15. The Amalek represents the flesh. And God said, kill them all, and Saul spared Agag, the king. Oh no, you kill him too. And that's the flesh. That's why God is never happy, no matter where you've attained to spiritually, He's not happy because there's always more Amalek, more sin there that needs to go, because God knows sin's like cancer. You don't get it all, it's going to come back. You leave any in there, it's going to grow, multiply, and metastasize until it's all over your body. So God He wants all of you. He wants to kill all the sin in us, and that's why it's a lifelong process of sanctification. There's no place you can rest and hang your hat. There's no spiritual lazy boy you can get in and kick back and get comfortable and stay put till Jesus comes. No. He's going to stir your nest up and make you uncomfortable so you keep going forward. So, we look for wisdom, we look for wine. Look at verse 4. I made me great works. That's the third thing he was seeking meaning and purpose in, was work. Career, accomplishments. How many people chase that? I made me great works. I builded me houses. I planted me vineyards. I made me gardens and orchards. I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruits. I made me pools of water to water therewith the wood that bringeth forth trees. I got me servants and maidens, and had servants born in my house. Also I had great possessions of great and small cattle above all that were in Jerusalem before me. I gathered me also silver and gold and the peculiar treasures of kings and of the provinces. I got me men singers and women singers, and the delights of the sons of men as musical instruments, and that of all sorts. So I was great and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatsoever mine eyes desired I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy. For my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my portion of all my labor. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do. Behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. So he was looking to his work, his career, for accomplishments. And it doesn't cut it, folks. In many cases, it's not necessarily money people are after. That's kind of a fringe benefit, but oftentimes it's the accomplishment. I want to build a great company, a legacy company, because that's an accomplishment. It's the accomplishment they're after. I'm a great entertainer, whether it'd be a sports figure or a singer or whatever. It's the accomplishment. I got there. I'm popular. People like me. I'm well known. It's that accomplishment. I did it. The money that comes along with it is always desirable too, but people are just after they're after oftentimes to build something that lives beyond them. They want to immortalize their life. And the Bible just says, get saved. But they're going to build something that's going to outlast them. He also tried wealth. Verse 8 there. I gathered me also silver and gold and the peculiar treasure of kings and of provinces. You ever notice how Rich people collect some of the weirdest stuff. I mean, furniture they think is nice. It's just ugly. Sometimes you put the name antique on it, that's supposed to make it palatable. I look at a lot of antiques and say, this is garbage. Why would I want to spend an exorbitant amount of money on a piece of garbage? But I remember my wife and I once went to this display. I think it was at the Cincinnati Art Museum or something, but it was many of the furnishings of the house of Lord Cooper, who was the high treasurer under Queen Elizabeth I. And he built this big old spread, and they just had they had pictures of his house because that great landscaping architect, Creativity Brown, I can't remember his first, I don't think I got his last name was Brown, but he designed everything, but he built this palatial mansion, and they had a lot of his furniture in there. It was just ugly. Oh yeah, it's worth a fortune because it's not made anymore. A lot of it was gold and all that stuff, but it was just ugly. I'm thinking. But I guess when you got money, you can buy anything you want. The problem with wealth is that it's a problem. Look at chapter 5, because Solomon gives us some warnings about this wealth that he learned. Chapter 5, verse 10. He that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver, nor he that loveth abundance with increase. This is also vanity. You never be satisfied with the wealth you possess. You always want a little bit more than what you got. It never fails. I mean, let's be honest. People don't talk about it as much, but we talk about, the greatest commandment people commit is thou shalt not lie. I don't know. How about thou shalt not covet? Covetousness is the antonym of contentment. Let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as he hath, for he has said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. So who's content? If you like to work out, you want to be a little stronger than what you are. Have a little better endurance, or there's always a level of fitness you can still improve in. If you're homely like me, you kind of like to be handsome. You got a big nose, you like it to be smaller. If you're short, you want to be tall. If you're tall, you like to be shorter. I mean, we're never happy, right? Does anybody not want a raise? Amen. And are you all remodeling your house? We're remodeling the church. We're trying to make it better, right? So some of that's not all bad, but human nature is we're never content. We want more than what we got. And advertising is designed to entice that tendency of your flesh. All right, chapter 5, verse 11. When goods increase, they are increased that eat them. And what good is there to the owners thereof, save the beholding of them with their eyes? The more you have, the more people there are around to help you spend it. It's amazing. I learned that early in life. When I was a teenager and I was a profligate, and a drug head, it's amazing. When I had drugs, everybody was around. When I was out, nobody was around. If you had something to offer, people were around to help you enjoy it. Chapter 5, verse 12. The sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he eat little or much, but the abundance of the rich will not suffer him to sleep. The more you have, the more you worry about losing it. In chapter 5, verse 13, there is a sore evil which I have seen under the sun, namely riches kept for the owners thereof to their hurt. The more you have, the greedier you become, hoarding all for yourself. You ever notice how people, it's funny, I've seen it just in the world, but I've seen it in the church. The people that have money are usually the worst givers of all. It's just the average Joe. Realize God's ministry has been bankrolled by the middle class. Rich people are too stingy to give. Poor people are too stingy to give. Or they don't have it to give. So it's the middle class average Joe that's been funding God's work for the last 2,000 years. It's funny. It just always cracks me up how people that have the money they're so stingy with it. They've got it to spend, but they won't. And what good does it do? You get to look at it. You get to look at your bank account. Wonderful. And so you hoard it, and when you die, within 24 hours, all the kids are fighting for it. I've seen that too. Where there's much wisdom, there's much grief. You live a lot of years, you see a lot of things. And it's amazing how many things I learned very early in life. I remember my grandmother died, man, my grandpa, boy, everyone was jockeying for what they had. And I remember telling the individual that was the executor of their will, I said, I don't want anything. I love my grandmother, not what she had. But I've seen, just had a friend of mine. I worked with at Nabisco for 30 years. His dad just passed. He said, Doug, he said, within 24 hours, they're over at my dad's house trying to ask, they want this, they want that. His mom's still living. They wanted his car. She doesn't drive. But it was his dad's car, and they're trying to get his car. They're trying to get their stuff. It's like, and I told him, I said, you're preaching to the choir. I've seen it. Been there, done that. It's awful. Well, you find people's true colors. Just remember, many times you wonder why you have trials in your life. Trials don't make you, they prove who you are. Crises reveal character. And so God puts the heat on to see where you land and see what you're made of. And it's amazing how many people, how that the facade melts away under the trials, and you find out what that person really is all about. And sometimes it's very scary. So Solomon here tried wisdom, wine, work, wealth, and last of all, women. Look at chapter 7. How many men are doing that? Or vice versa, how many women are looking for a man to fulfill them? One of the biggest problems in marriage, whether it's between unsaved or saved, is that so many times those two people enter the marriage thinking that their spouse is going to do for them what only Jesus Christ can do for them. When I got married, I was already saved. So I had the Lord. So I had the Lord before my wife. If she passes before me, I'll have the Lord after she passes. Okay? And it will be a great, great loss to lose my wife. But I will survive because I have Christ. And most people, many husbands and wives that are not saved, they lose their spouse, man, their life's over because that was their God. That was everything to them. But it is totally unfair to think that person can satisfy your every wish and desire and make you happy and content. Only God can do that. And that's why so many marriages are doomed for divorce. Why are you going to marry them? They make me happy. What happens when they don't? Silence. I know what happens. See ya. I'll get somebody else. Chapter 7, verse 26. And I find more bitter than death the woman whose heart is snares and nets, and her hands is bands, who pleases God shall escape from her, but the sinner shall be taken by her. Behold, this have I found, saith the preacher, counting one by one to find out the account, which yet my soul seeketh, but I find not. One man among 1,000 have I found, but a woman among all those have I not found. Now, granted, Solomon's a little pessimistic about women, but I think we need to qualify it. He was looking in the wrong place for the women he got. It's kind of like the guy complaining about his wife that he found in a bar. Well, you started off in the wrong spot, pal. You know? And so Solomon's problem with women was he was looking in the wrong place. Obviously, he didn't need 1,000. One would be sufficient. Okay? But nevertheless, he was looking for women. And how in this country, you know, in a more broader sense, this country is eat up with sex, man. They're just eat up with it. What do you think all this LGBTQ plus stuff is? You know, and do you understand, brethren, that sin never satisfies? Sin is voracious. No matter how much you give it, it wants more. So you start off with, you know, heterosexuality, you're not satisfied. Then it's homosexuality and lesbianism. Then we go into transgender. Our next step is pedophilia. And the next step is bestiality. And the next step has become sex murder, where you like to have sex and murder people, which we have multitudes of serial killers have been put away for that very problem. But you get worse and worse and worse. It doesn't get better. And we're not satisfied, and we keep looking elsewhere, and we're just going off the rails, trying to find what's going to make me happy. Look at Ecclesiastes chapter 2, because I think that this is so important. Verse 10, notice Solomon basically says in verse 10, I could have anything I want, and he did. You know, scholars estimate that his wealth could have been as high as $2 trillion. Remember, he made gold as stones, according to 2 Chronicles chapter 1. And so nobody goes across the parking lot on the way to the car today looking to pick up stones. They're worthless. That's what gold, it's like a penny. It's not worth that. He had so much of it. They were so wealthy. And he could have anything he wanted. And the reason why that's so important is because if I tell you all is vanity, I haven't had it all. But when this guy who did have it all said it's all vanity, those words carry impact. And he could have it all, and he did, and he said it's vanity and vexation of spirit. Everything that he searched for under the sun left him wanting. Nevertheless, generation after generation ignores these warnings and are still chasing the 5 W's. It hasn't changed a bit. But remember that Jesus is a good Lord. Every other Lord, every other God is destructive and oppressive. They may give you what you want, but they will give it to you at a high price tag. And look at our country. After 7 years at the Juvenile Detention Center as a chaplain, our country the family's destroyed. These young people are destroyed. They have no foundation to work with. And it is so hard to make change in their life, because it amazes me how young they are and how destroyed their life is already. It used to be, it took you a whole lot longer than 15 to wreck your life. How would you like to be sitting in the Juvenile Detention Center at 16 years old, facing double homicide, double aggravated robbery charges? 16 years old. Most of them that get in that kind of trouble, they're around 16 or 17. I had a 12-year-old in there for rape. How in the world are that young, you've destroyed your life that young? Used to be, at least took you to your 20s or 30s. Now they're destroyed anymore. They're destroyed by their adolescence, because in grade school now they're shoving all this LGBTQ garbage down their throat. We're destroying these kids before they have a chance at life. So Solomon records his bleak reflections on his experiments in vanity. And you know, if anything becomes clear that it is nothing, if there is nothing but nothing under the sun, our only hope must be above the sun. If a man who had everything investigated everything visible, then one thing needed must be invisible. Our answers are above the sun, not under the sun. But yet we continue to seek for purpose and meaning outside of God. And you know, as I said, Solomon's book here of Ecclesiastes is his memoirs, and it presents us with a great lesson. Your life will be a life of an example of how to live right, or an example of how not to live. So it's an example of how to live or how not to live. And there are many examples of God's people that have lived a faithful life, faithful to the end, and been a great example of how to live and serve God, how to serve Him, and how to finish. But how many Christians, their life is nothing more than a sermon illustration of how not to live? They just wasted their life chasing the wrong things. And sad to say, over the last 20 years, the fallout of Christian parents whose kids, they just fall out. They may hang in church during high school because they're still at home, and then once they go off to college, that's where it begins to fade, and by the time they leave college, they're total heathens or they're total materialists, and they just go off to chase the 5 W's and live a wasted life. Many of them never come back. A few do, and they're like Solomon. Their testimony is, don't waste your life like me. You ever heard a testimony of someone that said that? What a test. I mean, thank God that the Lord was able to salvage something beneficial from their life. But what a waste. There is nothing to me more tragic than a young person who grows up in church to where they know what the truth is. They know that life, if it's going to be profitable, is going to be one where they spend their life serving and glorifying God. And yet, they walk out and they're trying to figure out, what should I do with my life? Well, if you're walking with God, He's going to show you what you ought to do with your life. Okay? And in so many cases, we're over here worrying about what God wants me to do with my life. What's God's specific will for my life? Well, if you get busy doing the general will of God that's lined out in Scripture, and everything give thanks, 1 Thessalonians 5, how about, possessing your vessel in sanctification and honor, which is the will of God, 1 Thessalonians 4. How about get your mind renewed so you can prove the good, acceptable, and perfect will of God? We could have a whole lesson on the will of God that He specifically lines out for every single Christian. If every single Christian was busy doing that individual specific thing for your life would come. But we're not doing what we ought to know, or what we ought to do and what we know to do. Why should God show us that? But yet, we don't have to go searching for what life's all about. We know what it's all about. And to me, there's nothing more tragic than a Christian who throws away his birthright, like the prodigal son, and spends his life wallowing in the hog pen of this world, seeking for the same stupid, empty, vain things they are. What a waste. What a waste. To have it all given to you, a great foundation laid, and you just throw it away to basically live like a heathen, an unsaved heathen. You may be saved and go to heaven, but practically you live your life like an unsaved heathen. It's just tragic. And all your life's going to be is an illustration for some preacher like me to use and say, what a fool you were. Remember, the heart of every sin is the letter I. All right? And Satan didn't tempt Adam and Eve to lie, to cheat, to commit adultery. What he tempted them to do was to live independent of God. You don't need God. You can be your own God, write your own rules. You can serve the unholy trinity of me, myself, and I. That is why atheism is so palatable. No one thinks about the consequences. They just think, but they like that thing about, I get to be my own God. I don't have to be accountable. I don't have no one telling me how to live. I can decide how I'm going to live. I get to decide what's right and what's wrong. And yes, that's palatable. Hey, who wouldn't want to write their own rules to golf? I'd be a great golfer, or for that matter, tennis. As long as it's on the court, I don't care where the lines are at. As long as I get it over the net, doesn't matter how over the net I got it. It doesn't matter where it lands. I'd be a great player. If I didn't have to serve it into that box, I would be a great server. So it's very palatable on the surface. But take it to its logical end. How would you like to watch the Bengals play today if every player just did whatever they wanted to do? It wouldn't be a football game. It'd be recess at your average elementary school. Chaos. Everybody just running around doing whatever. That's the problem. And people don't think that far down the road. Oh, this is great, man. This is great. It's just kind of like how many of those kids I dealt with at the juvenile, they're snorting meth. Oh man, Doug, man, you just don't know how good I feel. Man, I mean, I can stay up for 4 days straight, I don't have to sleep, and I get so much done. And I said, yes, but you just admitted your nose bleeds for 7 hours at a time. And in many cases, you got cartilage coming out of your nose because it's eating up your nasal passages. And I said, not only that, you're 15, you're going to be dead by the time you're 25, if you make it that far. You realize what they use to make that stuff? Roundup? Liquid plumber? They put all these lethal chemicals in it. Yeah, you get a buzz, but it's killing you. But see, we just look at the front side, we don't look at the back side. Oh yes, so brethren, the bottom line comes down to this. Solomon's lessons are very simple. One, everything down here under the sun's vanity. It's empty and worthless. It will never satisfy you. It's just meaningless. The other lesson is, you want to find meaning and purpose? Serve God. Let us hear the conclusion of the matter. All right? Fear God and keep His commandments. In other words, in a broader sense, you want to find out what life's about? Get right with God, find out what He wants you to do, and do it. That's where it's at. Because if we reject God, the only thing left is materialism. And stuff doesn't make you happy. And if anything you can get a hold of today is that you have a world that is living the book of Ecclesiastes. And they need to be pointed out the fact that you're wasting your time. Your life is a trivial pursuit that's empty and meaningless. And so, let me encourage you, because the reason why I wanted to teach this lesson at the juveniles is because I got, amazingly, a lot of boys in there that are saved. I had one I led to the Lord this past Tuesday. So a lot of them get saved, but yet they want to get saved, but yet then they still want to go back to the world, the well of the world, to get a drink that's going to satisfy them. And that woman at the well could drink all she wanted from that well, and it's not going to satisfy them. The well she needs to drink from is the well of Bethlehem, the Lord Jesus Christ. They're drinking from the wrong well. And the point is how about me and you? How guilty are you? You're saved, but you are looking for your purpose and fulfillment and happiness in stuff. Video games, cars, clothes, jobs, money. Brethren, we need to own up to the fact we are just as guilty. We look to this world for our happiness too much instead of looking to the Lord. And so we need not to be guilty of that disconnect to where we know this life for me to live is Christ. It's not career. It's not money. It's not women and family and wealth and everything else you can throw in there. Father, help us today. We sorely need it. Yes, we're saved, but boy, we still have that carnal, Adamic nature that just craves and covets the things of the world. Lord, please help us and work in our lives that we are faithful to walk with you. And Lord, that you help us slowly but surely get victory of our carnality, to where our affection will be set above, not on things on the earth. Easy to pray, Lord, hard to accomplish. But work in our lives, and as the Master works on us, Lord, help us yield